Hello, welcome to the Infinity Stone podcast. I'm your host, Matt. With me, as always, is Andy, and we are here for our bonus episode where we rank the movies of the MCU. Andy, why don't you tell people a little bit about our podcast?
Yeah, so there's a chance that this is the first time you've checking us out. Prior to this, the previous 12 episodes of the podcast, which we do both on YouTube and audio formats, we've gone in depth of each of the first 19 films of MCU, rewatching each of them the week that we podcast about them. We have not done a podcast yet for the 20th film, AntMan and the Wasp, because we saw it 2 months ago and we haven't had as much time to think about it. Finally, somebody on the internet is talking about the movies of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. What makes us different, Matt?
Well, we're not coming at this from a critical, a movie critic perspective. We're also not coming at this from a hardcore comic perspective. We're not talking about the difference between the depictions of the movies and those characters in the comics. We are coming at this from the viewpoint of, fans of the movies, which is by and large where the movies get most of their money from. And I think that's what makes us different.
Yeah, so on the internet, as I was getting tons of conversation. White supremacy and porn, I think, are probably the things that move the internet right now. And but the conversations tend to be either, obviously people paid to discuss these things, which tends to be, either movie critics, pop culture critics, and they have a certain perspective, people, that are really into this. And generally, if they're really into this, they are really into genre or they're really into the comic books. I myself am into comic books to a fair degree, but frankly, not really the characters portrayed in the MCU. So we approach this more like we're fans of the movies. What do we like about these movies, and why have they worked for mass audiences? This is the discussions that are a lot online are niche, because that's how online conversation tends to go. But I do think like a big voice that had been missing, or maybe we just hadn't properly found it, are people who have discovered these characters or really appreciate these characters largely through the presentation of these films and what these films are, if you are a fan of them, rather than, say, somebody paid to view it. Now, that doesn't mean that you and I have given a free pass to each of these movies, and we'll get into that when we discuss the lower portion of our rankings. But it is that we like these movies. We like what these movies are, and we can judge them for what they are. These aren't the finest movies ever made, but they are movies that we've enjoyed quite a bit. How did we put together this list, Matt?
Really complicated method. You see, I made a list and you made a list, and together we made a better list, which is to say we just took our two lists and we averaged them out. And if there were ties, we talked through the ties and hash them out. There were a few ties. We'll probably
there's only two people who, if you've been listening or watching along, our opinions about these movies aren't particularly divergent. There's going to be a lot of ties because there's not a lot of variance within two different lists. You actually wanted to just keep ties, and I'm like, no, ties are for wimps and terrible internet content. So generally how we hashed it out is the first person who said we should put this one first. We were like, okay, sure. Because, the difference between, 12 and 13 isn't really that fast. Although if you in comments really want to get into how dare we rank something 11th instead of 10th, please, let's do it. Especially when you see who our 11 and 10 is.
I was going to say, I really hope that 10 and 11 are the one that causes that reaction. But we should get to the list. And so our first movie, and by which I mean our last movie, is number 20 on our list, The Incredible Hulk.
Any last words? Hulk! Smash!
All right, so I think, the simple reason to put Incredible Hulk at number 20 is two reasons. One, it's not very good. So there you go. That's why we started off. But, there were...
Nailed it.
But there's at least 2 to 3 movies you can say that within this list. And as you can see on our screen, if you're watching, you and I don't both have this on 20. You had it 19, I had it 20. So why did this become the worst of the bunch, it's because it commits the sin of being both not very good and also completely inessential. If for some reason you decided I'm going to watch all these movies, but 20 is too many, 19 is just perfect, you could skip The Incredible Hulk and miss nothing.
Yeah, this is, as you said, the most inessential of the movies. It's probably the most forgettable of the movies. The term I used when we discussed this movie on the podcast quite frequently was this movie is very bland, excessively bland, perhaps. It just kind of sits there. There's nothing to get really excited about. There's not a lot of joy to have in it. It just is there.
Yeah, and with that, not a lot to get excited about. You can't even really get as excited about like it being terrible, in
Which
the
is
way that
why
like
it was 19 and not 20 on my list.
It's because there are so many worse superhero movies than this. Yep. And we watched at least one in the or you did, like the Amazing Spider-Man 2, worse than this. I would say even Spider-Man 3 is worse than this. So it's not even like it can't even get you riled up about it. It's just there. And because that they've changed basically everything about the presentation of this character by the next time we see him, including, of course, the actor and the way that the CGI creation, the Hulk, looks. You don't need this one. This is completely meaningless. And, anybody who's like, well, but, Secretary Ross. For one, he's Secretary Ross instead of General Ross. Obviously, same character, same actor. But if the only time you've ever seen, Secretary Ross, William Hurt portrayal of him is Civil War and Infinity War, you're missing nothing. You don't need it from this movie. So that for me is making a tiebreaker of, it's, probably just as bad as the next one on our list, but it's also just meaningless. It's Marvel, and to their credit, saw that it wasn't working, and they were just like, that's cool. Let's just, we'll just have a do-over. It's soon enough into this, which is a lesson maybe their competitors should learn.
Yeah. And if you want to hear our full thoughts on this movie, you can go to the second episode of our podcast. And now we're going to number 19 on our list, Thor: The Dark World.
Hello? I accept your surrender. Anyone else?
So, Thor: The Dark World is number 19 on our combined list. It was number 20 on my list. You can see that it's number 19 on Andy's. So, this was number 20 on my list because, unlike The Incredible Hulk, there are things I remember about this movie, and they're usually things I hate. I really I hate what they did with the bad guys. I hate kind of like the way they discarded humor, except for one 15-minute sequence. There are things about this movie that I just outright hate, which wasn't true of The Incredible Hulk because I didn't care about The Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, and I guess that becomes the question: what is it worse? Not caring at all, or actually, having feeling, even if it's negative. I say, the thing that kind of holds it up is that this is a part of the overall Marvel story. What happens with Loki, both post Avengers and then leading into Ragnarok, does matter. The Soul Stone, or not the Soul Stone, but the stone in it, which one is?
I think it's Reality.
Reality Stone
is
the thing. I mean. Again, if you only find out when Thanos starts using it, that's probably better than finding out what this movie does with it. This one for me has a couple redeeming moments in that basically when they let him kind of show his charm, Chris Hemsworth still has his charm as Thor in a few scenes, most notably when they're breaking Loki out of jail, as we both discussed. We'd like that, and just the chemistry between him and Loki is a thing, but it's also really bad, and it's even more bad, worse. Yes, that thank you, Mr. Language Man. If you have any level of knowledge or affection of these characters from different media, if you know what this could have been, the story of the Dark Elves or Malekith, and then you see it now, which is my experience rewatching it this time, because the first time I didn't know any of that, and it didn't make me like it. I mean, it still made more, but it makes you more mad because it's like, man, what a lost opportunity. And another thing that this one does that, frankly, none of the others do is this is like the gloomiest of Marvel movies.
Yeah, this is the movie that kind of runs away from embracing its comic book origins. We talked about how one of the things that separates Marvel from its comic book cinematic forebears is the fact that the Marvel movies have generally embraced their comic book origins. They're not afraid of bright colors. They're not afraid of the silliness of comic books. This is the exception to that rule, where this one is very much afraid of everything that happens in the comics, and it runs from them, and it tries to make it kind of like Game of Thrones on the big screen, and fails pretty miserably at that.
Yeah, it's like a murky looking film throughout most of it, especially anything to do with Malekith and the Dark Elves. And as we talked about this on the podcast, that it was very much an attempt to do Game of Thrones, including hiring a director who has done episodes of Game of Thrones, and Alan Taylor. But it also comes off as like kind of a cheap combo of Game of Thrones and like later period Star Trek, because instead of being like elves and like magical or tricksters, the elves are basically like kind of like Klingon type things. Like they're just they're spacefaring, boring, and it's just it does feel like we can't just do all that Thor stuff. Thor, people liked it enough, but it didn't do the money that like an Iron Man or whatever. So let's show people that Thor isn't this silly character. And it's encouraging that the response to this made them be like, no, real silly. Let's go real silly with the
real silly. Yeah, they clean that mess up good in Thor Ragnarok. But if you want to hear our full thoughts on the movie, you can go to episode 5 of our podcast.
Moving on to number 18, we have Iron Man 2.
Point is, you're welcome, I guess, because I'm your nuclear deterrent. It's working. We're safe. America is secure. You want my property? You can't have it. But I did you a big favor. I have successfully privatized world peace.
All right, so for me, Iron Man 2 is the only other film that of the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe that I would consider not good. I think, these are the 3 not good ones. And, I'm not full on even saying bad, although we could say bad if we want to, just because there's so much worse out there, right? Like this bad with these are still not anywhere near as bad as the worst X-Men movies, as what I've heard the DC movies are. I don't really watch them, but frankly, I'd say they're all better than Man of Steel, which I did see. And it was just a muddled mess from the beginning. They kind of rushed it forward, or if that's not true, it certainly feels like it is. And it just feels like so many stories piled on top of them, none of them fully developed or cooked.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And we are in agreement about this movie. And we're also in agreement with the fact about how many bad movies the Marvel Universe has made. If we're talking about movies that we would rewatch, these 3 are the ones that I would not, or at least unless I'm doing something like what we just did here, which I don't think we're going to do again. So I think I'm safe. I don't think I have to watch Iron Man 2 again.
I might have to rewatch these movies at least one more time, just because I have one other person in my life that might want to see them. But at the same time, maybe he doesn't need to.
So why is this movie though better than the 2 that we've just talked about?
Robert Downey Jr.
No, that's not the answer I was looking for. The answer is Justin Hammer.
I was just getting to it. I was going to say, and Sam Rockwell. Yes.
No, you got to go right to it. No, Justin Hammer is hysterical. He's great, and he's a really fun villain. It's a shame that he is not the guy who he fights at the end. The guy who he fights at the end is terrible in this movie, and really
Mickey Rourke's Whiplash is not the first, but amongst the many less than exciting villains that Marvel had. I mean, frankly, he's probably the 3rd, and that's troubling given that there were this is the third movie Marvel ever
Yeah.
did. Yeah,
I would also say the action scenes in this movie are more competent than the ones we've seen before. Even when they do fizzle, like the very end of the final action scene when they're actually fighting Whiplash. The part that came before that, where they're fighting the drones, is good, and it's legitimately exciting and probably better than anything in Dark World or The Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, or if we're going chronologically, better than probably anything in Iron Man as well. Yeah, the other problem with Iron Man 2 is, it's very much shows the growing pains of Marvel, both as, they, making movies. They were, they just tried to do it. This is their third. And the idea now that they're going to grow even bigger than just we will have movies with sequels the way, other people try to set it up. But they try to make this the hinge point of the development of the entire Marvel universe. And it does not do that gracefully.
No, and we'll talk about other movies where they might try to do a little too much in them later in the podcast. But every other time they've done that, even when they've had trouble, they've done it better than this time. So, and if you want to hear our full thoughts on this one, you can check out episode 2 of our podcast. And coming in at number 17 on our list is Doctor Strange.
How long have you been at Kamatage, Mr.
Doctor.
Mr. Doctor?
It's strange.
Maybe. Who am I to judge?
So Doctor Strange is the first movie here where I probably have more good things to say about it than bad. It's only this low down because for me, the first half, probably a little less than half, the first part of the movie really drags. And when the movie finally gets to its extended climax, which is like basically the second half of the movie, it really picks up and it's a lot of fun. It takes a while to get there for me, and that's why it ranks so low on my list. Yeah,
especially when it comes in a time that I'm not sure where this is movie wise. It might be around the 16th or 17th movie they made, maybe 15 anyway. That by then we got the beats of the origin story, and we're kind of ready. Like as an audience, we've moved past that. Even if this is a character that had not been set up, and they're trying to introduce an entire world. Like I think it's justified for them to make an origin story, but we're like, well, look, man, we've seen all this stuff. Let's get to the cool stuff already. And just contrast that with Iron Man, which is a movie that I think this actually compares fairly well with.
I thought that too.
Yeah, instead of building suits, he's learning magic tricks, right?
Yep.
When Iron Man did it way back in 2008. It's a little fresher and newer, and frankly, that's what we also that's what superhero movies more often were, other than sequels, which then would just transfer a lot of this to the featured villain or whatever it is, finding out who this hero is, why this hero is. But by the time we're at Doctor Strange, it's like, yeah, moving on. And especially because unlike Iron Man, Benedict Cumberbatch's Doctor Strange, Stephen Strange, isn't as interesting.
Yeah, he's almost like a parody of like the tortured genius. It's like House, who suddenly can't think straight, which I think there was like a couple episodes of House where he did that. So it's very similar to that. But it also has the problem where that first half really suffers because the best part of this movie is the visuals. And when he's learning magic but can't yet do magic, you don't get those cool visuals. You don't get the bending world that's in the mirror world. You don't get the stuff in the dark dimension. And the thing is, this movie has some stuff that's legitimately good, that's working for it. It has a great climax. As we mentioned before, the way he deals with the final villain is one of my favorite resolutions in the entire universe. So in a way, I kind of look at this and I'm like, this is too low, except that then I look at the other movies on my list and I'm like, no, it's about right.
Yeah, I feel similarly. Now, obviously for me, it is too low because I think it's one film better. But even there, when I was putting there, it's like, but I like Doctor Strange. I legitimately like this movie. I will watch it. Somebody said, hey, let's watch Doctor Strange. I'm like, sure, cool. Because the magic is great. And, they do make sure to pepper it through, right? Beginning, we get, we
do get a bit
bad
of
guys versus the ancient one. When Doctor Strange gets to wherever. She pushes him through all the different dimensions, and that's pretty thrilling.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's an inventive film for a character that I've never, really cared for.
It's just
it's just that if this is number 17, and again, not 16, whatever. That's why we made this podcast, man, because this is 20 movies of reasonable quality to great quality later on. This is action blockbuster filmmaking where the 17th best entry, and it is still one that's like, that was pretty good.
Yeah, no, exactly. Now, if you want to hear our full thoughts on Doctor Strange, we covered them in episode 9 of our podcast. And next on the list at number 16 is the movie that we just compared Doctor Strange to, Iron Man.
I'm just not the hero type, clearly, with this laundry list of character defects, all the mistakes I made, largely public. Yeah. Truth is, I am Iron Man.
So in many ways, I feel weird about having Iron Man this low because it is such a significant movie within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And when it came out, you're like, oh man, that was pretty awesome. In fact, surprisingly so, because I had no true opinion of Iron Man at all, which put me in league with almost everybody in the world. And B, this is basically an independent movie. Marvel Studios just kind of created itself. They had never made movies before. They used their own money, I imagine borrowed heavily, and they're like, we're going to make a movie. And people don't think about it as independent cinema because it was still fairly sizably budgeted and was made by a corporation, albeit one that wasn't on the strongest financial ground. But this wasn't a studio film yet. And what they were able to do and how they introduced an entire world and a thing from to build from is, to be appreciated. But I did find when rewatching it this time, this is like, I don't love it like I used to.
I found the same thing. And this is probably the ranking that had you told Matt before the podcast where it comes in on the list, I'd be like, nah, that doesn't sound right. Because I remember I used to love this. I used to love this movie. I used to think very highly of this movie. I watched it again, and it's fine. It's good. There are moments that I really love, but on the whole, it's not as tight. It's not as sharp. There's a lot more that falls flat than I remember, and that's why it's down here.
Yeah, it's a movie that now I probably respect more than I love, and that's just because of what's come since. Marvel has successfully raised our expectations for what they can do, and it's totally understandable and fair that they could not do this back then. They invented a lot of the things that they ended up doing, and obviously then technology advances that allows you to do more effect wise. But even just as I kind of said, because it was a kind of an independent movie, they didn't have time to waste. They kind of had to get a movie out there. You can't just film for a while because that's expensive, even if you're not doing effects. Right. And it kind of feels that way in the movie. It's just like the mid action sequence is him flying into a place, sort of dodging a missile and then firing one off. And at the time, that was kind of thrilling. And then obviously it does get into the plane chase. So it's not just that. But now it's like, that's kind of weak sauce compared to what we have. Compared to what Doctor Strange and what they had to invent for him versus Iron Man. This is actually one, I believe I had them close in my rankings as well.
I think I had them back to back, or maybe
not quite, do I really like Iron Man more than Doctor Strange? Just kind of like, I gotta put Iron Man before because it's you don't want to judge a movie based on in newer movies or what they could do then, but if I'm sitting there watching, it's just like Iron Man drags at different times.
Yeah. I would say the big thing that might distinguish it from a Doctor Strange is that there's no long period where it drags. There are moments here or there, but I think they're fairly scattered. It does have a pretty good opening. The inventing stuff is really fun. And whenever he's tinkering, I think that's what really works to the movie's best. That's its best foot forward whenever he's making the suits, when he's working around. And so, But again, it's not as tight as I remember it being, and it's a tight movie that now they would get some writers in for Punch Up, and the jokes would be tighter, and there'd be a lot more of them, and we'd probably like it more.
Yeah, and the action would be so much better because it must be said that the final climax is nothing. Nobody loves this movie because of his fight with Ironmonger, and it just like they hadn't even written the scene yet. I think by the time they were shooting already, because they needed to rush something out there. Like this was a big deal what they were doing, and Marvel was a struggling entity. But you said he, and when he's working on it, and obviously the thing that's great about this movie, and the thing that ended up faulting the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe into existence, is the performance of Robert Downey Jr., which can't be discounted.
Nope,
the movie itself may feel a little undercooked, but he powers it.
Yes. Yeah. And right. And he is just as great then as he is now in the role. So if you want to hear our full thoughts on Iron Man, you can listen to the first episode of our podcast. What is number 14? Oh, wait, no, what are we on?
We're on 15.
We're on
Iron
15.
Man 3.
President Ellis, you continue to resist my attempts to educate you, sir. And now you've missed me again. You know who I am. You don't know where I am. And you'll never see me coming.
So this is the first movie on our list where the two of us disagree pretty significantly. There's one more we'll be talking about in a few. But I really like Iron Man 3. It's number 11 on my list. I think that it's the best Iron Man movie. I think it's the best foot forward of those movies. I think it's really funny. I think the action scenes are good. I love the plane rescue scene. And I love Ben Kingsley and I love Trevor, and it's a really powerful thing. And I know what your complaints are about the movie. And I agree, they are legitimate complaints. It's just I happen to like the movie in spite of them.
It's interesting because as you're listing all the things you like about it, it's like, man, I like that stuff too. And then I'm like, why am I so down on this movie? I mean, I remember, being like, yeah, it's not much. And obviously one of the reasons, and fairly people can say you shouldn't criticize a movie for what comes after, but the entire resolution of this movie, that the thing that they seem to be building for makes no sense now. Watching everything, but even when you're watching it, it's like, wait, did we just see the end of Iron Man? Is that what that is? That doesn't seem to be where this was going, but that seems to be where it went, and that seems like that's the lesson. And then the other thing is just it's a tough goal because again, I didn't even know whether to criticize this or praise it. Is that it feels so less like in maybe like a superhero movie, but it's just fine. It's good when they kind of branch out to other things, but more even less than an Iron Man movie, and more like the long lost Lethal Weapon 6 script 5. I'm not sure what that franchise ever got to, and that goes right down to writer director Shane Black, the writer of the former Lethal Weapon movies. But there's so many times when it's just Robert Downey Jr. is just Riggs now. He's not even Iron Man, maybe less so even Tony Stark. And it just sometimes that's great and glorious, and other times it just feels incongruent to a way that doesn't quite sit right with me.
Yeah, you see, for me, there's nothing wrong with Lethal Weaponing this up. I enjoy the Lethal Weapon stuff. I think it's a lot of fun. I would also point at, for another criticism, the fact, as much as I love Ben Kingsley and as much as I love the Trevor reveal, and don't get me wrong, I love the Trevor reveal, it takes a lot of power away from the actual climactic villain because you don't care. It just it kind of showed the whole facade there of villainy. It's kind of all a joke. And, it's like, oh, well, I'm not a joke. It's like, well, yeah, but we don't really care about you. We didn't have time to invest in you.
Yeah, it's almost like they didn't quite get the balance right, because it was my favorite scene in the movie. I listed it. It is funny and it's different than what the other movies do. But then, it does take a bit of the air out of the movie in a way that Thor Ragnarok later on doesn't, right? It's still you can still show that things have stakes, but then it's kind of oh, okay, well now we have to care about killing him, but I don't. And it's too late,
right.
And so then they have the big thing where everything's exploding and all of that, and it just it feels like them trying to shoehorn in superhero elements into buddy cop movie,
Right.
which wasn't buddy enough because it was still just kind of one guy. You know, he gets different buddies throughout, but it's not the same dynamic. And yeah, it's just maybe my issue with the Lethal Weaponness of it is that it fails to take the full benefit you get from having one of the characters in your movie be Iron Man. And I think the movie actually runs away from that in certain respects. And some of that is a strength. It shows that he's Tony Stark, not just Iron Man. But, you know, I also kind of want to watch an Iron Man movie. I feel like we've yet to get the Iron Man movie I want.
Except that I also feel like every time in the Iron Man movies, when he goes full Iron Man, like that's when the movies are like their least interesting. Whereas when he's Tony Stark, that's when they're at their most interesting. We talked about how much, you know, we enjoy when he's making his suits. Iron Man 3 is basically all Tony improvising with technology. And maybe that's why it's so high on my list, because I love that part of Iron Man. I love the Tony Stark part of him. And that's what this gives us a lot of. So if you want to hear our full thoughts on Iron Man 3, you can listen to episode 5 of our podcast.
All right. Next, number 14, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
I am Groot.
What's that?
He says, welcome to the frickin' Guardians of the Galaxy. Only he didn't use frickin'.
Bye, Twig.
We're gonna need to have a real discussion about your language.
All right, so the Guardians come back for a second time around. The first time was, you know, blistering fun, you know, unique settings and characters. You know, not your average superhero, you know, different than the Earthbound ones. And the second one was, you know, all that again, but, you know, not quite as good. And I think that's kind of where we landed and why it's a little lower. Although we'll say, like, I had it 15 on mine. I was like, do I really like Iron Man better than Guardians 2? And in that case, I could probably say easily, nah, not really. But it felt like Iron Man should be higher. So when this one ended up being tied, I'm like, no, let's just bump up Guardians 2.
Yeah, and I think the other thing about this movie is the daddy issues and the Yondu of it all really lowered it, in my opinion. And I think in your opinion, too. There are things about this movie that I love. Not just like, but love. The opening fight scene against the Obelisk, I think it's called. You know, I should remember this. This was a trivia question. But the opening fight scene is great. It's so much fun. It's colorful in a way that these things are so rarely. And it's beautiful and fun. And it's like everything I want out of these movies. That opening fight, I think, is better than any fight in the first Guardians movie. There are moments in this movie that I think are hysterical. You know, I think this movie is still funny. It's just, it's not quite as funny, I think, as the first one. And the times when it does go for its biggest laugh, it usually steps on a big character moment or other moment. And then, of course, there's the Yondu thing, which I think really lowers it in my estimation because it's so miscalculated. And it's like the heart and message of this movie was built on a character that I not only don't care about, but I actively dislike.
Yeah, I think like this has what a lot of sequels have. They're like, okay, let's take everything that people loved about the first one, do it again, but maybe bigger. Yeah. And, you know, like that's one of the reasons why it just doesn't quite resonate the same way for me is that there's nothing new in this movie that wasn't, well, frankly, there's obviously new settings, new characters, but a lot of it feels like what the first movie was, but the first movie has the advantage of, you know, this wonderful discovery. Like, oh my, this is a whole world and characters I knew nothing about. This is fun, unique. They're giving me something new. The Guardians is like, let's give it to you again, but maybe a little different. Because even if you say the opening sequence, which I agree, it's super fun, it's great. It's just a redux of their first opening sequence. Now maybe bigger and better, but it's like, okay, yeah, I see what you're doing though. You know, you're doing the opening sequence introduction over music thing. What else do you have in this case? What else they had? You know, they had the Yondu thing, but again, that's just movie one's mommy issues turned into daddy issues. They have a living planet, which I like what they tried to do with it. You know, I love that they went there. That they went through all of Marvel Comics. It's like, yeah, we're gonna do Ego, the living planet.
Yeah.
But it also means that for a good portion of the movie, half the team is just kind of sitting around discovering a new story, the origin story of Peter's dad. And so that isn't quite as good. And it's just more like, I like this movie. I love watching it. It is still fun. The Guardians franchise has been fun, both, these two and then their portions of Infinity War. Is not as good as the first one. It suffers in that comparison, and it doesn't feel like it's really doing anything new. So I would at a movie theater, I'm having fun, but when I'm looking over, it's like, that's kind
of what I was going to say. I think this is a movie that when I went to go see it in the theater, I enjoyed a lot. The second I start thinking critically about it, it lowers in my estimation, because I think there are holes in it that when you start really poking at them, it's hard to gloss over them. They become bigger holes. So.
And we'd like to say that they'll improve upon that in the third one, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll see what happens there. So you can hear us talk about Guardians of the Galaxy 2 in episode 9 of the podcast. And coming up next is number 13 on our list, Thor.
I now take from you your power. In the name of my father and his father before. I own it all, father!
Whosoever holds this hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor.
Thor is perhaps the great discovery of our rewatch. A movie that I didn't think too much about. I don't think you thought too much about. We both found ourselves really enjoying. We found it to be a light, breezy, fun adventure. And while, it's still, kind of low on our list, I guess like bottom third-ish, I guess how you want to define that. But it's a movie that we find ourselves enjoying for its simple pleasures.
Yeah, no, like if I would just, before doing this, just off the top of my head, how would you rank them without thinking about them deeply? You have the bottom three. We knew which were the three movies that we didn't like. I probably would have said it was the next one, right? Because then that's kind of the reputation of Thor, the first movie, that it's just like, it's just a whatever. Some people might even say, that it is one of the not good ones, or more likely that they never watched, and I think a lot of that is also a retroactive opinion when you saw Thor: The Dark World, right? And then it's just like, the Thor franchise is garbage, or it was until Ragnarok came out. But when we were watching, it's just the whole time it's like, I like this guy, I like this setting. Pretty much throughout the movie, it's either lower stakes because of where Marvel is at, but like thrilling. Some of the battles are thrilling at the beginning, or just charming. His fish out of water act on Earth is charming.
No, and that's the thing. And it's not just him that's charming. I think most of the cast is charming. Even the people that we don't see in Thor Ragnarok, I think are all good in this movie. The stuff that we think about as dragging the Thor movies down works in this movie. Frankly, his relationship with Jane in this movie works, whereas in the second movie, it really, really doesn't. And it kind of, tarnishes the way we think about that relationship, because we think about it in that movie rather than how it is presented in this movie. Like Darcy and Selvig are good supporting characters. The Warriors 3 are fun, so like there are good things about this movie, and it's not just Chris Hemsworth. It just happens to be a lot of it is Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah, and it's not just Chris Hemsworth or Tom Hiddleston as Loki, which obviously people have always been. In fact, Loki didn't become as much Loki until Avengers. He's just kind of in the background here and a bit more emo than Trickster as he would become later. Obviously he has some tricks, especially when he's fighting alongside Thor and all that. Right. But and Jane Foster, like that chemistry is real and is there. We watch it's just like it's powers the kind of romanticism of it, of classic heroes and lady story when she without making it a damsel in distress type deal. And we just don't think about that now because Thor: The Dark World wasted that so heavily. And then Natalie Portman has been fairly public about her distaste for being part of this franchise, but it wasn't there at the beginning. And yeah, that's just one of the, as you say, one of the great pleasures of this rewatch. It's like, yeah, man, I like Thor. Ragnarok helped because that helped to bring us back to somewhere where we would like Thor. Yeah. But it's just like, a lot of you out there maybe have not watched Thor in a long time because it feels like a slider film. And I mean, it's certainly not helped by the climactic battle, which feels really slight, where the metal destroyer is just walking through what looks like a cardboard cutout of a town. But if you just kind of look at it as a smaller film with smaller ambitions, and we still have some of those coming up. Yeah, it's like, I like Thor. I like both. And when I say I like Thor, I mean the movie and the character. It's just a pleasure to watch without it being as big as most of the other ones we're going to talk about.
I agree. So if you want to hear our full thoughts on Thor, you can listen to episode 3 of our podcast. And coming up next, number 12 on our list is Captain America, the First Avenger.
You could have the power of the gods! Yet you wear a flag on your chest and think you fight a battle of nations. I have seen the future, Captain. There are no flags. Not my future.
All right, and this is the other film that you and I have the biggest disagreement, thus leading to unusual placement on the list. You, for reasons that you will get into, are more down on this film than I feel like most people. So congratulations for original thought. For me, kind of like Thor, and how it's a pleasure that we just like Thor. I really like the introduction of Steve Rogers and his ever-present dignity and heroism, and I like that this is a very different film from the rest, and that Joe Johnston really makes it feel like the older films of the World War II. And obviously that must be clear that it's not like, doesn't make it feel like World War II. It makes it feel kind of like, the propaganda feeling of those films, but, in a hopefully better, less manipulative way.
Yeah, it makes it feel like The Rocketeer. That's what you're going for. There are a lot of things about this movie I like. The reason it's low on my list is because it just doesn't cohere for me. The movie doesn't come together the way I feel like it should. The individual parts are generally things I like. I would say the other reason it's low for me, and I think the biggest disagreement between the two of us, is I don't like the Red Skull, and you do. And that's one of the big things holding me back, because the last third of the movie is very much him versus the Red Skull, and so for me, that's where the movie loses me, whereas it doesn't lose you for that part. So
yeah, I think for me about this movie and about all these movies, one of the appeals of this type of storytelling, and again, we're not necessarily fully different, but where this one really comes in is I really like heroism. In my superhero stories, heroism really appeals to me, and frankly, I don't need it to be a complicated heroism, and this isn't, and I think very intentionally isn't. Going back to the popular conception we have in our mind of World War II, of us good guys versus them bad guys, and I don't care. I'll do it right now. Make a controversial statement right here on this show. Nazis are bad. Nazis are bad, and I don't mind that. The villain of it is a skull-faced, if he had one, mustache twirling evil. That isn't quite a Nazi, which is another thing. Frankly, it's probably better that it wasn't really Captain America winning full on what we know as World War II. And Captain America is good. And that is why he becomes Captain America. That is the Steve Rogers of it. And, you get it when he's, skinny Steve Rogers, but right down to their final fight where, Red Skull has these grand, ambitious things, and how you and I, as the most powerful people in the world, we could rule everything. And don't you ever give up. And Captain America's just like, no, I am going to do everything I can to stop you, because that's what heroes do.
Yeah. And, if you ask me what the best part of this movie is, I'd say it's Chris Evans as Captain America and just the character itself. I think they do a great job of painting why he is the way he is, where he comes from, why he works as a character. I think all of that is great. And well, if you ask for a second great thing about this movie, I'd say Haley Atwell. I would say my problems with the movie are the fact that it's just a movie that's just very segmented. You have the pre-Captain America time, and then it's like a whole different cast of characters when he's touring, and like a whole different cast of characters when he's like breaking people out. The only one that really carries over is Haley Atwell and a little bit of Tommy Lee Jones. You know, Bucky appears at the very beginning and the very end, but you know, he's not really in that part in between.
And even not even the very end, because obviously.
Right, yeah, that's a good point. Right. Yeah, so it's just, you know, it's kind of like always rotating in different supporting cast to react to Captain America. You know, I think it would be stronger if it had, you know, more characters that were through lines to see his full transformation.
Yeah, I see some of that as almost like a strength, is it's kind of like we're condensing like this whole period of Captain America into like the different periods. It's almost like an anthology type storytelling until we get to the, you know, big final act,
right?
Instead of maybe one story. Although I mean, obviously the story of the rise of Hydra and Captain America of that is throughout, but you know, for much of Captain America's early comic book life, it was just all stories within World War II. So this is kind of a way of touching all of those. I mean, that I'd never read in my life or discovered. Right. But yeah, it is kind of just like all of the things that Captain America can be. And I find that in some ways it helps it move a bit more than a lot of these other origin-based movies are. Because, you know, you get a bit of him becoming that and then this and there. But, you know, I can see why somebody, for instance, would be like, we're really going to do a USO show? That's a little boring. Is the only purpose of that in the film so that we can explain why he has a costume. But, yeah, I also find like some of that's kind of fun.
Right. I actually think, you know, the USO show is a great example of a scene that I really enjoy, but I also don't know if it needs to be in the movie. So it's tough like that. If you want to hear our full thoughts on Captain America, the First Avenger, you can listen to episode 3 of our podcast. And coming up next at number 11 on our list is Ant-Man and the Wasp.
I do some dumb things, and the people I love the most, they pay the price.
Thanks to you, we had to run. We're still running.
Let's go.
So this is the movie that I think might be most subject to moving if we ever rank again, because we haven't podcast on this movie yet. We have not had our full thoughts. We haven't had chance to sit down with the DVD or the Netflix stream or however we want to watch it and really go through it again and come to a full conclusion. It is at this place on our list because we both came out of it and we were like, I enjoyed that. I like that. It was fun for what it was. And, you know, what it was basically what the first Ant-Man was. There are a few differences, which I think we can talk about here briefly, but it is largely similar to the first Ant-Man. And that's why it is here on our list.
Yeah, and what we discussed about Ant-Man, and we briefly touched on this movie, you know, after you had seen it in theaters, is that the Ant-Man films are just fun little romps, and generally often coming at a time when, you know, Marvel fans could use such a thing, and I think they are strategically deployed that way. Like for instance, Ant-Man the Wasp was in the can before Infinity War was, and obviously almost all of it takes place before then. But I think they wisely made the decision. It's like, you know what, after Infinity War, people might want something lighter, and I think that's what we were responding to. We wanted something lighter. We wanted something more fun, you know. And that's what this movie is interested in. I think another reason why you delay it is also you don't need to market this one on the same level you need to market Infinity War ones, but that's a different discussion. And so I think that's what we're responding to, and that's why it's here now. And you know, that's why we didn't want to just podcast about it, you know, months after the fact that we watched it. Is we left with that good feeling that we enjoy from Marvel movies, and this is a romp. And you know, I think that's just, you know, it's characterized in, you know, the breezy interactions of some of the characters, most especially Michael Peña's, but also just like, you know, they have car chases with mini cars and it's through the streets, and you know, they're rushing back home. Pest dispensers and rushing back home to avoid FBI agents. It's just like, you know, this movie is always moving, always smiling, and you know, it's great that this big superhero blockbuster franchise has room for that.
Yeah, and you know, I think there are two big differences between this and the first Ant-Man. I think the first is Evangeline Lilly actually gets to do something, which is a big plus in this movie's favor. You know, and then I'd say the other big difference is we don't spend a lot of time small. We spent time in the quantum realm, which is like super, super, super small. But one of the fun parts of the first Ant-Man was seeing the character small and then among small objects that appeared big. Whereas here, what they spent a lot of time doing was making small objects bigger. And so, but we don't spend a lot of time seeing the characters navigate through the world when they are small. And that's a thing that I think is a negative compared to the first Ant-Man.
Yeah, and obviously they brought in big with Civil War, so yeah, that's something else they could do. But yeah, I mean, one of the eventual things about Ant-Man, which obviously we will get to because we haven't, is that dichotomy. And I think probably the strongest parts of this movie are when they do that. When Evangeline Lilly and Michael Pena are in the van and going up and under things, and then big and then small. That's like, oh man, big small, that's so much fun. Right. Also, the villain is inventive with a different approach to how to handle it.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this briefly. I really appreciated the fact that this movie kind of made it so that the heroes were not out to defeat a villain. They were out to accomplish a goal, and the villains kept kind of getting in their way, and they had to get around the villains because they had a time limit on their goal. And I think that was an inventive way to tell the story that certainly other movies have done before. We haven't seen a Marvel movie do that before. So I really appreciated that too.
And you can hear our extended thoughts on Ant-Man and the Wasp when we get around to recording them, which will be sometime after it is available for people to watch legally in the comfort of their homes. And so if you aren't following us, but you would like to, you're like, man, I really want to hear what these guys think about that kind of movie. Subscribe in all of the various ways you can do that, whether it be YouTube, podcasting, Twitter, etc. All right, so that is the first 10 of our list, 20 through 11. We're going to take a quick little break here before we get into the top 10.
I am Iron Man. You think you're the only superhero in the world? Mr. Stark, you've become part of a bigger universe. You just don't know it yet.
Who the hell are you?
Nick Fury, director of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Oh.
I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger initiative.
But before we get into our top 10, we're going to take a quick little break here because if you've been watching the show all along, you know that we regularly have segments with people much cuter than us. And this is no exception. Christopher, welcome back to the show.
Hi.
Hi, yes. We ran through all of our MCU costumes, which was a considerable amount. But you decided there was still one more you wanted to wear. So yes, this is actually Christopher, not Wolverine. You want to show yourself a little Wolverine? Do you want to show everybody your Wolverine moves real quick? We'll have to pretend there's claws, safety concerns, and all of that.
Right, you don't want to poke someone's eye out.
Oh, spin. The legendary Wolverine breakdancing. And the Canadian beatboxing. Yes, this one's very patriotic for us. All right, and then along with being Wolverine, we thought, since Matt and I, no, hopefully you still have the middle one. You're doing the whole thing, making me guess, or did you just eviscerate me? Yeah, I use the word yes. No, he'll know it tomorrow though. So yes, Matt and I have been doing a list of what we think the rankings of the movies are. There's many other lists that you could make for the MCU, including who are the best superheroes. And you thought you'd share who your favorite superheroes are with everybody, right, bud?
Yep.
Christopher. All right. Who is the first hero you want to show us tonight? About I don't think he ranked them 1 through 6 because getting to there. All right, these are Christopher's favorite heroes of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
I like Bucky.
There we go. Bucky. Bucky makes the top 6.
Yeah, Winter Soldier.
And why did Bucky make your favorites?
Since in some of the movies he blocks with his middle arm.
Yes, you like it when they're shooting at him and then it becomes like a shield.
Wait.
Do you want to take off your mask? Logan does that a lot. There he is. All right. All right. Who else you got?
One of my favorites is Black Panther.
There we go. Show everybody. There we go. Yeah, on the screen.
T'Challa.
And why Black Panther?
Since he has cool reflexes.
Very cool reflexes, yes. Cat-like even. All right. Number 4.
Wait, this is number 3.
Yeah, number 3. We're counting up. We're counting up.
Yes, he counts upwards. The third one, yes. Thank you. See, he's just like 2 days of kindergarten, and he's already nailed it. All right, who we got here?
Star-Lord.
Ooh, why Star-Lord?
Since he's so funny.
He is very funny. I bet you like that Jackson Pollock joke. And then when he saved the universe with a dance-off, huh?
What?
I gotta say, one of my favorite moments of the podcast is when you challenged Matt and I to a dance-off. All right, number 4 now.
Yeah, who's your number 4? AntMan.
Yeah.
Yes, AntMan. What? And I think I probably know, but what do you love about AntMan?
Since he shrinks and grows.
That's right.
And he shrinks.
Oh my God! A little AntMan came out of the big AntMan. And yes, I imagine you can relate to a tiny hero and what it's like to be in a big world.
It's more like a Yeko.
Or probably more. Do you think it's really funny when the Thomas the Train engine hits Yellow Jacket? And he hasn't seen Ant-Man and the Wasp yet, but what's your favorite part from the commercials?
When
Hello Kitty?
Hello Kitty.
Yes.
Yeah.
Candy dispenser.
All right.
That's
5.
Yeah, 5.
Yeah.
Captain America. As we've said before, we're definitely a Captain America household here.
You may be seeing this pose in the video we made.
Oh yes, when the Civil War reenactment that we did, complete with Civil War music. And why do you love Captain America?
Since I love his shield.
There you go.
Loves his shield.
And the funny part is when in Civil War when he flings Spider-Man.
Yeah. All right, and then Matt, do you have any guesses as to who the other hero on this list would be?
Iron Man?
Let's show him. Spider-Man.
Oh, that was an obvious one.
And what's so great about Spider-Man?
I love his webs and his web wings. In fact, you've seen my Spider-Man homecoming costume.
Yes, in fact, he was very torn over which costume to wear tonight because he wanted to bring that one back. Yes, I bet if I asked you top 1, Spider-Man would probably be your favorite.
His hand can turn.
And you got brand new Spider-Man shoes for school, didn't you?
Yep, and Skechers.
Nice.
There we go. So there you go. That is one opinion of the top heroes of the MCU.
And we had the movies.
Yeah. And everybody on comments, if you want to share yours, try to be kind and not just be like, how dare he list somebody so-and-so. You left out, because it was tough making these choices.
I showed him at the movies.
And, well, no, we'll get into those in a bit. Anything else you want to say, Christopher?
Well.
Hey, what does Wolverine say all the time?
Hey, bro.
Perfect. I mean, with a Canadian accent. And
yeah.
Oh, yeah. And you're even wearing a Spider-Man shirt underneath there. So, yes, very much Spidey. All right. Well, Christopher, if I had to rank my top 2 children, you would definitely make that list. Mwah. Good night.
Scott, I believe that everyone deserves a shot at redemption. Do you?
I do.
If you can help me, I promise I can help you be with your daughter again. Now, are you ready to redeem yourself?
Absolutely. My days of breaking into places and stealing shit are done. What do you want me to do?
I want you to break into a place and steal some shit.
All right, so that was my youngest son, Christopher. If you haven't been watching the podcast or listening, each episode he does make an appearance, generally dressed adorably in a costume of one of the heroes we're talking about, sometimes even returning for credits or post-credit scenes. So if that's something you'd be interested, you should check it out. And as I'm sure you've guessed from the video clip that just played, kicking off our top 10 at number 10 is AntMan.
Yeah, it comes in right before its sequel. So come at us if you thought that Ant-Man and the Wasp was better than it.
Which I think you did, right?
I did. But again, they're very close. So, no, Ant-Man, as we just said about Ant-Man and the Wasp, is an enjoyable romp. We really like the fact that it's the little guy running through the big world, like, the Honey, I Shrunk the Kid effects. We love the train battle. We like the briefcase part right before that too. Like, there's a lot of stuff about this movie that's really good, including Paul Rudd.
Yeah, like, come on. Like, we also like comedic Paul Rudd movies, right? When used well, obviously sometimes they just get lazy. It's just like, that wasn't much. But it's just another Paul Rudd comedy, and it as such is really fun. He is, Paul Rudding it all over the place, and it sounds dirtier than I thought it would. And that means there's charm that he's somewhat comes off as a little dim-witted, but not completely. Just have an engineering degree, but I want to make sure that you people know that engineers can be dim-witted. And it's the Michael Pena portions of it were so great that they made sure to increase his role in the sequel. And it's just like Ant-Man is a fun movie that anytime you kind of want to watch it, like that, it should put a smile on your face. And moreover, it also just shows the range that within the storytelling of superheroes Marvel's had, because it's not big, and no pun intended, but it never should be. Right. Little Ant-Man movies should be. I'm not doing this on purpose. It should be lower stakes and just kind of like
smaller stakes, tiny stakes.
But yeah, just like you want to have a good time. This is our fun little ant character.
Yeah. So if you want to hear our full thoughts on Ant-Man, you can listen to episode 8 of our podcast. And coming in at number 9 on our list is Avengers: Age of Ultron.
This is exactly what I wanted. All of you against all of me. How can you possibly hope to stop me?
Like the old man said. Together.
So Avengers: Age of Ultron was a movie that I think we both look at and we recognize its flaws. It's just that the stuff we like about this movie really overcomes them to a significant degree. And the stuff we like is generally, not entirely, but generally the big set pieces, which are fantastic in this movie.
Yeah, I think you could make the argument, besides the three bads, that is his most flawed movie of Marvel, and it has some of the sins of the things we discussed earlier, even with Iron Man 2, that like it, the weight it has to carry for an entire universe worth of movies, pushing forward both bringing all of those things together and then pushing forward the next phase, which would be the Thanos phase of it all. Right. It strains underneath all of that. The metaphor I made is because I discovered this when I rewatch it, of which I've done many times, is that like the movie's trying, like all the pieces, the mesh is there, it's just bursting out of the seams. It's just barely there, but you can see the storytelling problems that Joss Whedon tried to overcome. It really does try that, like, this scene has to happen for this scene, for this scene, for this scene, but it just feels like a lot. Now, the advantage of rewatching it more than once, if that is something that you would want to do, and more especially watching it at the comfort and maybe the pace of yourself at home, is that it's less overwhelming experience that way. I'm not overwhelmed by this movie in the same way. When I came out of it, it's like, man, that was a lot, and I'm not sure if it was everything I wanted to be. Now, I also came out, was like, man, there was a lot of awesome. Yep. But I think a lot of people, when they think about this movie, especially if they've only seen it once, maybe twice, is like, it didn't land. It didn't do what it needed to do. And thus, in the parlance of especially internet opinion sharing, it was awful, because either things are awesome or they're awful. This is not either of those things. I feel like this is a very fair ranking, and we both feel exactly the same. Is that
because we both have it number 9?
Yeah, the highs are incredibly high. The things that this movie does well shouldn't be understated, even if maybe this movie tried to do more than it was capable of doing.
Yeah, and the thing we talk about is the fact that this movie was not up to the engineering feat that it had to undertake to, support the franchise and tell the movie story here. It introduced a lot of characters. It introduced a lot of story threads that had to be done, not just for the movie, but for the franchise. And it tried to give every character stories, and it just buckled under that weight. I think we compare it to some of the Russo brother movies. And, while I don't think they have the visual or set piece flair that Whedon has, they are just better, in my opinion, at the engineering of these movies. And I think that's why it ranks a little lower than some of those movies on the list.
Yeah, but I do think we are probably people that have it higher than other people, because there's a lot of complaints about this movie, and I think a lot of them are justified. It's just, especially now, especially watching it the way we did, summer long, watching all of these. It's like now I pretty much just focus on the stuff I like, and it helps that I know where the story's going throughout, so I don't feel lost in the way that I think many people justifiably do. It's a flaw of the movie, not of the viewer, if they do. But yeah, now it's like, okay, yeah, and I get that. In fact, and you can even see, okay, I see what they were trying to do there. That is there for a reason, which you can say about a lot of it other than, Thor's bath. And it's just, now it's just like, yeah, let's get to the Hulkbuster, man. I love watching the Hulkbuster. I love seeing them all fight Ultron for 40 minutes. I love the opening when they're fighting Hydra. I love, Steve and Tony, having a mano over wood chopping, and just so many things are there that when something either
the party scene, we love the party scene.
Yes, or when something feels like why is this there, or something that isn't good, like Thor's bath, or Natasha and the
Hulk's relationship.
Yeah, I was trying. What's Hulk's real name?
Bruce Banner.
Wow. Yeah, that's the one. It doesn't matter, because we're like, okay, well, the other things that I like are really coming up soon. And I just, so I love those things, and some of them as much as I love anything within this entire franchise. So that's where I think right here is a good spot for a flawed but ambitious movie.
Especially because I think the next 8 movies on our list are a clear top tier. And I think this is kind of delineating the step down from that. But if you want to hear our full thoughts on this movie, you can check out episode 7 of our podcast. And coming up next at number 8 on our list is Thor Ragnarok.
Yep. Go ahead. Stay here and enslave people for that lunatic. Keep drinking, keep hiding. But me, I choose to run toward my problems and not away from them. That's what... Because that's what heroes do.
I'll be honest, I often just don't know how to fully engage my opinion of Thor Ragnarok, because in general, I love watching this movie. It is as fun as any movie that this franchise has ever made. And yeah, anytime I watch it, it is pleasure. And probably every time I watch it, there's always just a few things gnawing at me. It's just like, why'd you have to do that too? Yeah, and it's just like, and it's because it's confusing, because the answer is because we wanted to have fun, man, because we wanted to be funny. And again, I love that stuff. I love that it's the funny movie, but there's just a few things. There's just like, you took the air out of the balloon, and thus it makes it so that I put it at 10. But I love Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah, you see, whereas me, I also love Thor Ragnarok, only I gave it the proper respect it deserves and put it number 4 on my list. The stuff you talk about, I do see it in a couple scenes, not I think as often as you see it, but it does exist. But Thor Ragnarok is just, it's a pleasure to watch, and not just because it's funny, but because it's visually inventive, because it has some kick-ass fights. It has not just 1, but 2 Led Zeppelin drops, which, come on, what other MCU movie has that? So yeah, I love Thor Ragnarok. And I think the fact that it is number 8 on our list speaks more about the fact that we're entering the realm now where there's a lot of good Marvel movies, and we think very highly of pretty much the rest of the movies on this list, and we like the ones that came before. It's just like, this is the point where we're like, yeah, no, this is all great from now on. So
yeah, and I think a lot of it just speaks to personal taste, and that you
Yes.
know, again, this is so much fun. When it's all said and done, this will probably be one of the movies that I watch the most frequently because the rest of my family are always down for it. They little Christopher is ready as soon as Led Zeppelin drops to be. He's like, yeah, I want to watch that. And again, because it's fun, it's light, it's humorous. It's just my personal tastes are that I like it when these movies give me maybe more of that inspirational hero feeling.
Right.
And this movie often doesn't want to give, very consciously wants to avoid that feeling in a very winky type way. And again, that's fun. That's what this movie is doing. But if this is my list, the movie that does that isn't going to rank as high as the movies that give me that.
Right. Whereas I really love the funny stuff, and I probably prize that a little more than you do. I mean, I say not probably, I definitely do. But which is why it's higher on my list.
Same reason why an Iron Man 3 is higher on your list as well.
That's a good point. If you want to hear our full thoughts on Thor Ragnarok, listen to episode 11 of our podcast. And coming up next at number 7 on our list is Black Panther.
No need, Okoye. I can handle this alone. I will get Nakia out as quickly as possible.
Just don't freeze when you see her.
What are you talking about? I never freeze.
I mean, again, we're talking about how we love every movie on the list so far, and Black Panther is a movie we love. It's a movie that is probably the coolest movie in all of Marvel. It's a movie with one of the best villains in the entire MCU. It's a movie with just a ton of great actors and great performances. The fact it's at number 7 on our list is by no means a diss on Black Panther. It just speaks to the fact that there's a lot of movies we like here, and the differences at this point are very small.
Yeah, and some of it also is just proximity in that some of the ones that I like more are ones I've had more time with. Black Panther I've seen twice, but also it's just it kind of speaks to that rhetorical device when people are just kind of talking about the greatness of things, in that they'll say, "Oh, this that's a top 5 movie. That this guy is a totally one of the top 10, 12, 13 players in the NBA or something like that." And then you realize that probably over the time of talking to that person, they've said that about 15 to 16 different people. And that's the kind of thing here. Black Panther, oh yeah, that's a top 5 MCU movie. And then you have to rank them. And it's and this is where I've landed here at number 7. And I
had it at number 5. I think it's a top 5 movie.
There you go. And maybe it kind of goes back to the thing I just said, in that I like the thing I prefer most, the thing I respond to most, the reason why I like this franchise, these movies, is I like heroism. And I'm not saying that Black Panther doesn't have that. T'Challa, definitely goes for that. It's big moments when he wins the first battle, when he comes back from the battle. Except that this is the movie that seems less interested in the hero than it is of the villain.
Right, and that's something that it'll be interesting when we do see a Black Panther sequel, and we will see a Black Panther sequel.
How? He's dead.
Yeah, well, I think they'll find a way. Shuri, in the comics. But when we do see a sequel, it'll be interesting if the sequel makes us reevaluate this movie one way or the other, because what we've seen with some of the older movies is that the sequels do change our opinions of the earlier movies, because we get to know the character better. We get to know, and we can appreciate certain things about them differently, or maybe not as much. If Thor: The Dark World's it up. I don't think that would happen, but you never know. So that's something that could also change opinions.
Yeah, and some people will be like, how dare you? That's not fair. How do you judge one movie by the other? It's because I'm a human being, and brains change depending on proximity and tastes and personal way. There's no objective way to totally view things. There's no way to separate, well, this is how I felt then, and now I can't feel differently now. That's not how minds and brains work, especially when we're talking about something like this, which is totally just about how we like something. This isn't, we must be objective.
No,
this is superhero movies. You know?
Yeah. If you want to hear our full thoughts on Black Panther, you can listen to episode 11 of our podcast. And coming up next at number 6 on our list is Captain America: Civil War.
Captain? Big fan of Spider-Man?
Yeah, we'll talk about it later. Just
Hey, everyone.
good job.
You've been busy.
And you've been a complete idiot. Dragging in Clint, rescuing Wanda from a place she doesn't even want to leave, a safe place. I'm trying to keep you from tearing the Avengers apart.
You did that when you signed.
I'll say right now, this part of the list is actually the toughest. You know, the 7, 6, 5. I'm not sure much separates these for me, and yeah, we just had to do that,
which is why they were tied in our rankings.
Yeah, and so Civil War I have here because. Like I love the big superhero-ness, and like it doesn't get much bigger superhero-ness of a movie that's basically superheroes and superheroes, and you know the thrill of them all combining and seeing the things that they could do fight with each other, and frankly for much of it a lower stakes fight is fun, and they know that that's going to be the big thing that it hinges on, and it's fun. But then besides just the big airport scene, there's actually a full movie around it that does raise a lot of interesting questions, things that you can debate about, even if there's really one truly right answer and somebody who's just being weird with their answer. And the emotion of what happens in the final act of Steve and his both his sense of what's right and his great abiding love of Bucky, and the very real hurt of Iron Man.
Yeah, and that's the thing, that as much as I love the big fights, and I do love the big fights in this movie, for me, the reason why this movie ranks highly is because of that great emotional final fight that's built upon so much of the history of the movies we've seen before. This movie takes advantage of the fact that we've been watching a shared universe, that we know not just about Captain America, not just about Iron Man, but we know about their relationship with each other. And we see their relationship with each other get strained to the point of breaking. And they still have not talked since this movie. We've had an entire other Avengers movie since this point, and they did not talk in that movie. And we will have to wait until next year to see them do so. And so I think this movie handled that really well. It's one of the only Marvel movies where the villain basically he wins. His plan goes as he planned it.
I think you're forgetting one major one where the villain wins.
Yeah, I am. I forgot that one. I don't know how I forgot that one.
We should talk about that scene.
Not talked about it yet.
Yeah, and I think it's just this also shows what this universe can do that no other franchise could do. Is that the third Captain America movie, and I will still contend that this is still a Captain America movie because
it is.
The approach, the perspective that it's most interested is that of Steve Rogers. This is a Steve Rogers conflict in a continuation of Winter Soldier is a Steve Rogers conflict of the things that Steve believes are right, he will pursue whether, the law says so, whether authority figures say so or not. And that's what, we're seeing here. But we get to see it with all these superheroes and all these Avengers. So we get an Avenger story that's a Captain America story, which is good because, we've gotten to a point where the Avengers stories are going to be too big for something like this. They can't be personal on this level. If they are personal on level, and we'll get to that soon, it's often the villain's level or something like that. Whereas so we can kind of see what it's like to be in an Avengers world, but through the eyes of, say, Steve, and then obviously a bit through the eyes of Tony. You can't get that in traditional film franchising because none of them have ever been this big. None of them have had different interconnecting stories that they can pull parts in from.
Yeah. And the other thing about this movie is it does a great job of introducing two of Marvel's current biggest heroes. This is the first time we see Spider-Man. This is the first time we see Black Panther, and both of their introductions are fantastic. And they both really add a lot to this movie, even though they're playing smaller supporting roles. Spider-Man's a very small role. Black Panther is a bit more significant, I would say. But So if you want to hear our full thoughts about Captain America Civil War, you can listen to episode 8 of our podcast.
Before we get into our top 5, we are going to take a little break for another top 5.
There was an idea. Stark knows this. Called the Avengers Initiative. The idea was to bring together a group of remarkable people. See if they could become something more. See if they could work together when we needed them to fight the battles that we never could.
All right, but before we get to the top 5 of the show, there is, of course, one more person who has been integral to the show this entire time, and that is my son, Alex. And Alex is going to share his top 5 MCU movies, and as you'll see, quite different from ours, Matt.
Okay, let's see it.
Every movie we are about to hear, you and I have already discussed so far on the podcast, and let's do it. Starting with number 5, Alex.
Age of Ultron.
Wow.
Age of Ultron. There we go. You and I both kind of hovered around that, but tell us why. Tell us why Avengers: Age of Ultron.
It's Ultron. Everything with Ultron, it is awesome.
Okay.
So like when he's talking to Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver in the church, that's what did it for you? Or is it more like the fighting stuff?
Fighting.
Got it.
There ain't no strings on me.
Big James Spader fan over there.
All right. And now, what do you think of the scenes on the farm? Well, there you go. He likes those too. As do I. Cap tearing a thing apart in wood. All right.
That's number 4.
Number 4. Doctor Strange.
Wow. Why Doctor Strange?
He has magic.
Oh, you like the magic?
Yeah.
Do you like the cool effects of the magic?
Yes.
Like which is cooler, the mirror world or the dark dimension? Or are they equally cool in different ways?
There's the mirror world.
The mirror world. Just so you know, Alex, this is an audio podcast. So if you want to maybe project your voice a bit.
The mirror world!
All right. Number 3.
Black Panther.
There we go. Black Panther. What is cool about Black Panther?
Besides everything?
Besides everything, yeah. I mean, is that...
Yeah.
I mean, it is a very cool movie. I would honestly venture to say it's probably the coolest movie.
I think that's a safe bet.
What do you think so?
Yeah, it's the coolest movie.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite character in Black Panther?
Shuri.
Shuri.
Okay.
She is fun. And, as soon as she did a meme, there we go. You were in it.
Yeah.
What?
Number 2.
He's not even racist like that joke. Thor Ragnarok.
Thor Ragnarok. Show the people this just because we're continuing with a visual audio thing. Thor Ragnarok. And why do you love Thor Ragnarok? I think I might have a guess.
Because there's Korg.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
I would have gone more with the generic because it's funny. Is that
No. It's because there's Korg. That's the right answer.
It's right there. It's right beside that. Right there.
All right. So Korg Ragnarok, number 2. All right. We did this before, and I want to see again. Do you have any guesses as to what Alexander's number 1 movie is? I think Rudy had a guess.
Yeah, I couldn't quite interpret that. I don't have a guess at the moment. Why don't you just show me?
All right, number 1
is Captain America, the first
Avenger. Yes, the first Avenger.
Yeah.
I should have guessed that. You guys are a big Captain America family, so.
Although I guess there's 3 caps to choose from, so that's it.
Yeah.
And
there's
why?
3 Iron Men, the 3 Avengers, and 3 Thor. Like everything.
All right, Alex. Why Captain America: The First Avenger? Why is that the best movie?
It's set in World War II, and there's Captain America when he didn't know the future existed. That's like the best story ever. And there's Nazis.
Yes.
Okay.
And I mean, if anybody can appreciate repping, skinny Steve Rogers, I think that would be you, right? This is like, before and after the super soldier serum.
No, before, and then he eats a lot.
Yeah, maybe I'm the super soldier serum that didn't go very well. I'm the not that, hopefully it didn't turn me into a Red Skull, but a hulking type figure.
Is he though?
All right, so there you go. That is a very different top 5. And if the rest of you in comments are, top 20 is just a little bit too much, let us know what your top 5 is if you can commit to that. I know some people have moral objections to ranking things.
And when we come back, you'll hear our top 5.
You have my respect, Stark. When I'm done, half of humanity will still be alive. I hope they remember you.
Now, you just heard Alexander's top 5. Now it's time to hear our top 5. And number 5 on our list is Avengers Infinity War. Now, I had this a little lower than Andy, but again, this is the part of the list that's very difficult to separate. I see the arguments in favor of all 3 of these movies that we've just talked about. This is a movie that I think I just held back a little bit because I want to see the sequel before I fully commit to ranking it higher, because the story's not complete.
Yeah. For me, obviously, I'm the one dragging it up. Pulling it up is probably better. Because it's just a spectacular spectacle, and that was a very Stan Lee thing of me to say. Stupendous, spectacular spectacle spectorum. It's just because there's never been a movie like this for me, or I think frankly, there's never been a movie like this, that they pulled together, 4 or 5 different franchises into one big overarching thing, and everything about this is big in a way that for some reason, for some people it's almost too big. It's too big to be personal, but for me, I love the bigness because it shows what this franchise and what cinema can be. I love the smaller stories. You and I are both high on AntMan. I don't mean that as a pun, but it is a smaller story. Captain America: First Avenger is a smaller story, but when Marvel wants to go big, it showed with this, man. They can do it, and it's just I'm endlessly impressed by this film.
Yeah, no, I am too. It's even with my reservations, the thing I'm always struck by is just this is a long movie that moves, and it does not feel like a long movie. This movie just keeps going and going and going, and it gives you stuff throughout the movie. And there's no real point in the movie that I'm like, oh, that's the slow part of the movie. It moves, and there's a lot of fun to be had with it. Though maybe fun's not the right word, because it's pretty much a butt whooping the entire time.
No, but it is fun a lot throughout, right? And a lot of it, trades on the fun that Marvel has, and that the comfortable feeling that maybe the heroes will pull it out in the end. Thor was getting his butt kicked throughout Ragnarok, and then pulls it out in the end. And if you don't know the story, or frankly, if you're of the belief that Marvel won't go that way, it's like, okay, they'll find a way. And meanwhile, you get some of the fun. You get Peter Parker interacting with Doctor Strange. You get the Guardians talking about the man god in front of them, or the Rocket is the friendly rabbit, that sort of thing. But yeah, it is a bit heavy, and that's why like my reaction often seen is like, man, they really did it. And by what they really did it, I mean 2 things. One, that they did it. He snapped his fingers and they killed half the universe. And I frankly, I like the audacity of killing all the people that most people thought were safe. Now, obviously, a lot of people then it's like, well, now we know it's not real. It's like, that's fine. None of this is real, man. But the other that they really did is like, they really did it. They brought all the characters into a cohesive film, a cohesive story. And we talked about Age of Ultron, that it was half this amount of characters and they struggled here, and they really did it. They paid off our viewing loyalty, the investment that we've had as fans for 10 years. It's here in this film, and man, they did it, and I love it.
Yeah, no, I agree. They did it. And, and there is just a lot to enjoy about this movie. But if you want to hear our full thoughts about it, you can listen to episode 12 of our podcast, the one right before this one. So coming up, number 4 on our list, Guardians of the Galaxy.
How do you know about this?
I don't even know what that is. I'm just a junker, man. I was just checking stuff out.
You don't look like a junker. You're wearing Ravager garb.
It's just the outfit, man. Ninja Turtle, you better stop poking me.
What is your name?
My name is Peter Quill, okay? Dude, chill out.
Move!
Why?
Ronan may have questions for you.
Hey, you know what? There's another name you might know me by.
Star-Lord.
Who?
Guardians of the Galaxy is fun. F-U-N, and fun in a way that doesn't ever make me feel like, man, like a little too much. And maybe that's because I don't care. I never cared about these characters until this movie made me care about them.
Right.
I barely had ever heard of them, to be real. And that's part of the fun. This one has a sense of discovery that, the other films can't, because I do have some level of knowledge of them. This was tabula rasa, and not just of the characters, but of the world they inhabit. And Marvel is very much interested in introducing you to, the great cosmos of it. And it's like, hey man, this stuff is going to be weird and you're going to love it.
No, I agree. This movie is just, it's so much fun. It's so inventive, when it landed, and it's still is just, a bunch of fun. We talked about some of the great scenes in this movie. When we talked about it, one of our favorite scenes is just that opening scene where he's not fighting anyone. He's just dancing to some music, and that is emblematic of the entire movie. It's characters that are having fun in the moment, and the audience is having fun with them.
And what this movie did for me, and frankly, I noticed it even when I was watching Infinity War and both like the Guardians and the Thor scenes, is it reminded me of like the joy that you get from like spacefaring movies in a way that we hadn't, because this one precedes the new Star Wars movies. This was out before what was part 7 called?
Force Awakens.
So it's just like, and that brings back, like, that was a big kind of storytelling as a child, not just of the Star Wars movies, but like, things like The Last Starfighter or things like that. Just like, we're going to go to these different worlds, and they're going to be these kooky looking aliens, and everything's going to be a little strange, and it'll be exciting. There's a sense of discovery, and that's what Guardians brought to this in a way that Thor didn't, right? Thor was like one place, another place, but it wasn't like, it didn't have the expanse and the fun, and it's just, obviously, like, Star-Lord is a Han Solo for this generation.
Sure. Yeah. No.
Especially more so than the actual Han Solo, who they made a movie about recently. I've heard, but never seen.
We discussed that in one of the episodes, actually, quite briefly, weirdly enough. But and that's the thing. Like, I feel like this movie, introduces us to new characters. And it does, there wasn't the expectation. There wasn't the belief, this was kind of a chance that they took, and it worked because it succeeded wildly beyond our expectations, and frankly, probably their expectations of what it did.
Definitely their expectations, because this was the first one that I took my son to, and right away he's like, I want to be Star-Lord for Halloween, and it was not that long away from Halloween. It was touch and glow whether we would be able to find a Star-Lord costume anywhere, because stores were not, lining their shelves with. I don't know if there were toys made for this, or there were the sort that are always made, and Christopher showed you one of them, but I think there was like a Star-Lord, a Rocket, because that is a very indication they did not know, and nor should they know. They'd never been able to sell a comic book with these characters. What would make you think you can sell hundreds of millions of dollars worth of movie tickets? But they did, and turned into a franchise that is made over 1.5 billion in just movie ticket sales. So I can assure you they didn't know. I think they had a chance, like they had an idea once the movie was getting close. It's like, I think we've got something here, and they did. And I think it's also one of the more important movies in the entire franchise, because it's the one where they took a huge swing, a huge gamble, and it's like, we can do it, so we can do anything.
Yep. No, I agree. So if you want to hear our full thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy, you can listen to episode 6 of our podcast. And coming up next, number 3 on our list, is Spider-Man Homecoming.
What's up, guys? You forget your PIN number?
Whoa, you're the Avengers! What are you guys doing here?
Thor, Hulk, good to finally meet you guys.
Oh, you'd be more handsome in person.
I don't know if anyone thought they needed another Spider-Man movie before this movie, but when it came out, it was doing things that we never expected and succeeded wildly beyond our expectations. This movie is fun, but it's also grounded. It's small, but it's big in terms of its character journey. It takes itself seriously and also tells tons of jokes. I love this movie so much. So much.
Yeah, and if you want a hint at our level of affection for both this movie and this character, you can just quickly look to see that we almost did a 2-hour podcast on just this one, and I mean an expanded look at all the Spider-Man.
Yeah,
movies.
we talked about all the other Spider-Man movies too. You made me watch all 5 of them, including the Amazing Spider-Man 2,
especially the Amazing
Spider-Man 2. But again, like this movie, it has a villain who, like, I think just works for this movie with a great performance, who's like perfectly tailored to the ambitions of the movie. He's not trying to rule the world. He's just trying to steal some weapons and make some money. It has a hero who's still a kid, and it gives him appropriate fears and worries as a kid. And an actor who is fantastic playing him, and you should actually talk some point, because otherwise I'm just going to keep gushing about this movie.
Well, I just said with Guardians of the Galaxy, this has proved that Marvel could do anything, and apparently one of those is fix a character that another studio had messed up. That's what we get here, and the question that we had leading into Spider-Man Homecoming is like, do we need another Spider-Man movie? And the one I come out with is, we don't need those old ones. And some of those old ones were fantastic, but this is a fresher Spider-Man for this generation, in a way that Raimi's never was. Raimi's wasn't even for the generation who was watching it. It was an homage to the older generation, which we loved, but it feels like 100 years old when you watch it. And what Homecoming does, it's delightfully so, is it introduces the concept of teenagers in a way that, like, you don't even think about it. And forget teenagers, pretty much everybody else in the Marvel universe is freaking old, right?
Yeah.
Like most of them are older than me, and I am so old. But like Mark Ruffalo, Robert Downey Jr. Like, I guess Chris Evans is probably younger than me, but like they're either
he might be older than me.
yeah, they're like late 30s, 40s, 50s. So that's very old, mature, even if some of their movies are silly cast. And now we get like a fresh injection of youth, and it works so well. And hopefully, in same way the Guardians introduced, we can do these kooky spacefaring. I hope that Homecoming and the Spider-Man franchise within Marvel will show like we can do some young characters, because they have a stable of them that are a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, and I think, like you said, like they can do young characters now because Spider-Man works so well. They can, they got a funny Spider-Man, which is something that I think, even people who like the Raimi movies always were like, well, Spider-Man's quippier than that. He's always, like talking back to his villains. And, well, we got that here. This movie, and, we got just his high school stuff is just so much fun. Again, I love this movie. This is such a good movie. So I guess if you want to hear me gush about this movie and talk about all the other Spider-Man movies,
which we do not gush over to the same degree, a little bit for some and very much not so for others.
But you can listen to episode 10 of the podcast. And coming up next, number 2 on our list is Avengers.
Yeah, 2, and obviously, if you're keeping score, what number 1 is. This they were back and forth to the point where you and I are back and forth on these, and it just comes down to Avengers was just such a watershed moment for me as a movie fan, and that you see it and you see how the way that all the other Phase 1 movies, which had some pleasures and stuff in their own way, but they come together and it's just a bunch of superheroing up all over the screen, and just so many times throughout that movie it's just like, yes, that is what I've been craving since I was a small child.
This movie's awesome. This movie's just so awesome. The thing I always come back to, and if you listen to us talk about this movie in the one episode, the thing I talk about for a very long time is the Battle of New York. But that's because it is so ambitious on a scale that we had not seen before, and that I don't think that we have matched since. It is a just fully realized ongoing fight that gives all of our characters stuff to do, and it's unique and distinct. It's filmed during the day. It's not like filmed in an empty airport. It's beautiful to watch. It has great fight choreography. It has great geography, so you know where everything is. And it's just like, that is what I want out of these movies. Can I get more of that?
And the answer is yes. That's kind of the introduction and the promise that the MCU is proven. It's like, yeah, we're going to do that. Does it always land? We can have our discussions, our favorites of what was the best. Maybe it never topped this, or maybe it right now. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to do superheroes. We're going to go big. We're going to have space aliens invade. We're going to have a god fighting next to a monster, fighting next to a super soldier from the past in a full blue costume, next to a guy with bow and arrow, girl with guns. But yeah, it's just like that. That's what we are. This is what we do. And as a mission statement, and Avengers tells you everything you need to know about these movies, and whether you're in or out. If you watch these, it's like, yeah, that was all right, it was kind of silly, then just be out. You don't, there are no cultural obligations to watch these movies. But if you're like, man, that was fun. I didn't even know this stuff could be fun, because as we discussed, most of the people watching these movies are not people who experience these characters in the other medium, or maybe they took them here or there, they watched a cartoon when they were a kid or whatever. It's just like, yeah, these stories can be fun, they can be epic, they can be exciting, they can have action type characters that you recognize, interplaying, bouncing off of one another. It's exciting when they're on a ship and an alien space Viking god is talking to an FBI guy, and it's just like, it's all there. And that's where I get to, like, that when I was a kid, that's what these stories were to me, but they were never that in other mediums. In comic books, they could be anything. They're limited only by the imagination and the skills of the creators. There's no budgetary restrictions. There is no fear that if we do this, people will think it's silly, or at least the era I grew up in. I do believe they would become a little more self-conscious here or there in later ones. But when you saw them in TV, they were cheap nothings. Thor was a tall guy in a furry costume, not a furry, with fur on. Daredevil was a guy in a black leotard. And I'm talking about the really old Incredible Hulk movies. And movies, Batman was either incredibly outlandish or a little more straight-laced, which worked for that character. But it was never just like, this is superhero stuff. We're doing it straight. We're not concerned about what it is, and it works.
Yeah, no, it works really, really, really well. Yeah. So if you want to hear our full thoughts on Avengers, you can listen to episode 4 of our podcast. And next, the number 1 movie on our list, drum roll please, Captain America, the Winter Soldier.
I'm not gonna fight you. You're my friend. You're my mission. Then finish it. Because I'm with you to the end of the line.
Captain America, the Winter Soldier is, well, it's my favorite movie of these. It's just thrilling throughout. And I think that's a good word to describe it because it very much is a thriller. It's a superhero thriller where you have this tension that rises throughout the first half of the movie until Cap makes his escape from S.H.I.E.L.D. And then you kind of realize what is against him, what has been building up in the background. And then he has to take down not just like this one villain, but this amorphous entity that has been hiding in plain sight all along. It is so good at that emotion, at capturing that spirit. It has a great lead performance by Chris Evans. This might not be the most fun of the MCU movies. I think it's the best of them.
Yeah, and that's kind of been the push-pull I've had between my 1 and 2 throughout.
Yeah.
Is like, I do believe Captain America: The Winter Soldier is the best movie Marvel has made. Full stop. I think I just like Avengers a bit more, and that's, you know, ultimately.
And I
that's
don't
where
blame you
defaulted
for
to
that
on my
because
list.
Avengers is great too. You know, it's you know, these are two incredible movies. I think it's fitting that these are still the top 2 on both of our lists.
Yeah, and I think with what, you know, first Winter Soldier has going for it is, yeah, it might be a little more serious, but within that, you know, it's funny. I say all of that, and then, you know, number 1 is the most Batman, I guess, like one of them, or, you know, the most real world one of them. But you say that, but they're still fighting on flying helicarriers, and they still make time in the middle of the movie to put Arnim Zola in a TV screen. So, yeah, it's still Marvel Universe.
You still have a super soldier with a metal arm who's been alive for 70 years and being thawed out occasionally to murder people.
Yeah, so, you know, they're only going to go so real, and it's just because that's this character. It's going to be a little more grounded. You know, I mean, in this universe, he basically has superpowers, but they're lower level superpowers. Is like really strong, really fast. You know, his partner is a guy with wings. You know, and you know, Spy Lady, who is fantastic in this movie. By the way, I don't want to denigrate Black Widow. You know, her
interplay with wings. You know, I mean,
yeah. But her interplay with Captain America is some of the. It might be the best duo in than any of the movies have done. And it's just like a very, you know, it feels like a complete story and well thought out the entire way. And the mood of this film, I think, is what most people will respond to, and that it's very much about the, you know, 70s paranoia over, you know, government infiltration by, you know, sources with, you know, bad thoughts, which, you know, I don't know if it has any meaning in today's world, but, you know, it's still something pretty cool.
Yeah, and the thing about this movie is it has its resonances throughout the rest of the MCU. The events of this movie have affected the, you know, the subsequent movies. There is no more S.H.I.E.L.D. because of this movie. You know, and what they replace it with is what caused a big breakup among the superheroes, because, you know, S.H.I.E.L.D., for all of its flaws, was kind of, you know, a touchstone. It's people thought they knew what they were getting out of it, and well, they weren't quite getting out of it what they thought they were.
Yeah, S.H.I.E.L.D. was the lodestar of the Marvel Universe.
Yes.
That's a reference that'll be just killer when people are listening to this in here. And then what hasn't been said, but it needs to be why this is true. Number 1, it kicks so much ass in so many ways. You know,
that elevator
right there from
scene,
the Lemurian star. When, you know, he's fighting on the boat is so awesome. When, he's fighting
when
Bucky in the streets.
When it zooms out and he's knocking people off the side of the boat, that's great. When he's fighting Bucky in the streets, that's great. But the best of all, the elevator scene, man. That elevator scene is just awesome. And it's so good. It's not even just the fighting. It's like the moment before the fighting. That's the best part of it.
Yeah, and I mean, if you've seen, you know, my list, if you keep track, the Captain America movies for me are the best, and is, you know, gets back to what I've been saying throughout this whole thing. Even in a movie like this, where it's about political thriller, you know, paranoia and all that. Yeah, the true north of this film is the, you know, goodness of the heroism of Steve Rogers, and against all odds, he will tear everything down because it's the right thing to do, and you see that near the end when, Nick Fury is still trying to find a way to save Shield, and it's like, no, there's no saving it. This needs to end. We have to end Shield because it is a problem. And I mean, it's thrilling, and even for somebody foreign, when the representation of America is sitting there to authority, that this display of might isn't freedom, it's fear. And that, right there is been throughout Captain America. It's why he would stand up to bullies even when he was weaker than me. It's why he will not sign a terrible accord that would limit his ability to do what he needs to do, and that is save people. It's why when we see him with a beard, he's been fighting to save people, and he's going to say, hey, if you get in my way of saving people, I'm going to fight you, because what we are doing is right, and we know what it is because it is.
Yeah. So if you want to hear our full thoughts on this movie, you can listen to episode 6 of our podcast. And that's our list. But we're not done quite yet. We have one more idea, which is the Marvel Universe is not done. We have a full slate for next year, and then we don't know what's coming up next. We have release dates in 2020, 2021, and 2022, but we don't know what movies are there. So we thought we were going to play a fun little game. And we were going to try to pick the next 10 movies.
Yeah, so to be clear, that's the next 10 after the 3 we know about. So the next movie...
So after Spider-Man Far From Home.
Yeah, so the next movie that will come out after Ant-Man and the Wasp, and we finally got some full-on pictures this week. It was Captain Marvel that comes out early next year. Then we have Avengers 4. We don't know what it'll be titled, but obviously it'll be the resolution of what happens after Infinity War. And then Sony and Marvel's Far From Home, which I guess would kick off Phase 4, although they've kind of said that we might not be developing in a phase type system.
Right.
So what are the next 10 from there? I said to you, we don't necessarily need to put these in order, but I did, for the first little part, I was just kind of thinking what's next, because what was supposed to be next after Spider-Man Far From Home was Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and it might not be next.
It might not be the first movie of 2020, though I still think it will come out in 2020. They have 3 slots in 2020. I feel like that's going to be one of them.
Yeah, so some people like this whole story, and obviously they feel very passionately about what happened. Like, oh, now they won't do it, or maybe so many directors, nobody will want to direct it. It's an honor thing, and that for me, it's like, that's cute. You guys clearly just watch these movies. If you think that, as I said, a franchise that have made over 1.5 billion just in box office receipts, forget all the other ancillary revenue streams that this franchise has created, because they certainly started putting out Halloween costumes and the like, and theme park rides that they have, like, they're gonna make another movie. So yes, I do have Guardians as my 10, but right. I think this delay will make it not be the next one. So I think the next one after Spider-Man Far From Home will be Doctor Strange 2. And I think for simple reasons is that it's the one you can rush.
So I think Doctor Strange 2 is, again, super likely. It's on my next 10. I don't know exactly when it will be, but I think it will be, I think 2020 is a good target date for that movie.
Yeah, they have their stars in place, including what I would assume is the villain. They have the director. Yep. Frankly, it's a movie that a lot of it's on green screen. So I do think, and it's one with smaller ambitions too, right? Like Doctor Strange doesn't need to make, $1.8 billion. It doesn't. If it does, 500,000, or if it does just a little better than what Doctor Strange won, and I think it's fair after what we've seen from the characters since then that it probably will. They'll be like, cool, that was good. Now we can gear up to the next thing.
Though what's interesting is the first date they have in 2020 is actually a May date, and May is usually where they like to drop their biggest, or the movie they expect to make the most money of the year, since it's the start of the summer season. So, maybe they have something else in mind there, but I'm not thinking about the order. I'm thinking about what we're guaranteed to see in these next 10 movies. And for me, there is no bigger guarantee besides Guardians 3, which was announced, than Black Panther 2.
Yeah, well, at this point, I'd say Black Panther 2 is even bigger guarantee than Guardians 3. I suppose that is a universe where they just can't do it, but, it's going to happen in the next 10 movies one way or another. Yes, Black Panther 2, and frankly, that would fill the May thing. I just feel like, just for that discussion, you don't want to mess it up. Black Panther, you can't.
I agree.
So, whatever time Black Panther was going to come out, I think that's the time it will come out.
I think that'll probably be like the 2021 May movie or something like that. You give it the extra year. That'll be 4 years since the first Black Panther movie. I think that's the time to hit, and you can then give it the May slot there.
See, I think Doctor Strange, Guardians, and Black Panther 2 are the obvious ones. Those will happen because they're the ones that were established. I'm going to introduce a new franchise to there, and this is one that's they've talked about that. Kevin Feige has basically said, we're committed to doing that, but they're not announcing them now because characters died and all that. Sometime I think maybe even within the within that group, maybe even before Guardians 3, they're going to make a Black Widow movie.
Yeah, so I had actually forgotten that on my original list, and then I remembered that as we were discussing the movies today, and I was like, oh no, that's going in there. So there's going to be a Black Widow movie. I agree. That's on the list. I think that's maybe not quite as high a guarantee as Black Panther and Guardians 3, but it's very, very likely. It's like that tier right below. And there's, I think there's definitely a Black Widow movie. So we got 4 of our 10. I have one for you that might seem a little unlikely, but I don't think it is, which is I think there's going to be another Spider-Man sequel in those first 10 movies. And you might say there's not enough time. No. This Spider-Man sequel that's coming out in 2019 is coming out 2 years after the first Spider-Man movie. These things are fast-tracked, and the reason they're fast-tracked is because Sony has to make money off them too. So you got 2 studios working on them, not just one, which means that these are going to move a little faster, and Spider-Man's going to be at the core of their push. So you will see a Spider-Man 3 in the next 10 movies after Spider-Man Far From Home.
Yeah, and you pointed that out to me, and at first I was like, well, no, because I was counting out what happened in Phase 3. Yep. But yes, Marvel doesn't get to fully decide this, and I believe part of their agreement was, there's going to be a 1, there's going to be a 2, and there's going to be a 3 within a 6-year period or something. Yeah. And that's all they have the agreement for. It's just the 3 for now, and then the agreement that they can use Spider-Man and what other films that they want to use. So I agree. Yeah, there will be a Spider-Man in the next 10, and then I think the other one that will be in the next 10, whether it's in the middle or at the very end, is there will be a 5th Avengers movie within there.
I also had that down too. Yeah, because, and I think this is going to probably be a very different Avengers movie than what we've seen before. I'm not entirely sure what they're going to be doing with it, but I do think there will be another Avengers movie.
It's going to be Skrulls.
Actually, I think Captain Marvel is going to be Skrulls.
Oh, no, Captain Marvel is going to be the Skrulls from then. And then it'll turn out that there's been Skrulls on Earth this entire time, and that's
okay. That's fair.
It's just my guess. I don't know.
One thing about the 5th Avengers is I think I do worry that, it might be like the 11th movie rather than because it'll be coming out right near the end. But I think there will be another Avengers movie because what movies make the most money? The Avengers movies.
Yeah, and I actually like it, and that's kind of how they've done the phased approach, right?
Mm-hmm.
Although they have 2 Avengers, I almost feel like this one they might need to put in the middle to use as a launching point to new type franchises. Because Black Widow is a new movie, a new franchise, but a character that's been there for 10 years.
So if you look at the announced schedule in 2022, they do February, May, July, which is the last movie of that year is July. They seem to only do that when they have an Avengers movie in May. Otherwise, they like to end in November. So I think the Avengers movie will probably be in May of 2022, which leads me to another pick I had for this. What comes after Avengers movies, Andy?
Oh, you think they're going to do the Ant-Man one?
I think they're going to do a third Ant-Man. And I think that'll be so I think there will be a third Ant-Man.
I also think there will be a third Ant-Man. I don't know if they will consider it a priority within this next 10. They might say, let's filter in some newer ones. We always have Ant-Man there.
Okay.
Although, as said, Paul Rudd is also one of those actors who is not young. He just looks like he's never aged. So I don't have Ant-Man as part of the next 10. I think it'd be like the 11th or 12th, and maybe that supports if Avengers is 10th. Instead, I think there's one more franchise that they're going to continue forward, and it'll be the 4th installment of a franchise instead of a 3rd. They need to do a 4th Thor movie.
I'm completely with you on this one.
Yeah, and I think everybody involved with it is fully on board for that idea. I think, what Taika Waititi brought to it and the way they did it just refreshed their energy for it. And as we noted, there aren't that many people from the original 2 other than Thor himself. So, it's not like, they're going to drag out Anthony Hopkins or possibly not even Tom Hiddleston. It's just what, will Chris Hemsworth come for? I think Chris Hemsworth would be all for a Marvel universe that is now finally centered around him, as opposed to him being maybe the other appendage.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Now let me ask you a question. I don't have either of these movies on my list because I don't think they're going to fit in the time. Do you think that they will be able to have a Captain Marvel sequel in the next 10?
No, instead, I think they will use both maybe a bit of the Captain Marvel movie, but probably more likely Avengers 4 and maybe Avengers 5 or one of the Spider-Man movies to continue the Captain Marvel legacy with Ms. Marvel instead. And that'll be a Kamala Khan Ms. Marvel movie. And that'll be how they kind of continue that franchise and also kick off a new one that has, a lot of energy and excitement within so many other things. I talked about it, on the Black Panther podcast about how she's gotten a big push and in both their Avengers cartoon. They're putting out another cartoon where she's going to be, where they're showing some more of their more diverse heroes. And there's some circles of the internet, and if you're on comic book Twitter, they're always pushing back against it, but Marvel don't care about those people. They care about all this new money. And we talked about this in Black Panther. How do you get new money? Character types that you've never explored before. And with Ms. Marvel, your idea, well, she doesn't have the name recognition for people who've been around for a long time. We discussed with Guardians, you don't need that for That's never going to happen. She's never going to be an old character, so why not strike while the iron is hot? So I do believe that within the 10 after Spider-Man, we'll get a Ms. Marvel.
I actually also had her down for my 10 too, because I don't think that they will have time for a proper Captain Marvel sequel, but I think that's also going to happen. The other sequel I don't think they're going to have time for, I wanted to see if you did, was, are they going to have time for 2 Black Panther sequels in the next 10?
Now, I think Black Panther, they realize this guy can carry us for like 5 years. So why?
Yeah, so they'll take their time. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, so they'll just do the one sequel.
I also think through the next 10, that you don't want to just keep. This is time to start new ones, and we have.
I agree with that.
So I have 2 new franchises to finish my top 10.
Well, besides Ms. Marvel.
Yeah. So I already have Black Widow and Ms. Marvel, and 2 brand new ones, and these will be the last 2, and that'll be all the signatures will be out of the way, and they will get in Fantastic Four and X-Men.
Yeah, so because of the way my 10 shook out, I was going to have Fantastic Four and X-Men, and then I realized I forgot Black Widow. So I had to discard one. So I thought to myself, which one are they going to rush after getting the movies? And I guess it's like, when does this merger go through?
Yeah.
Okay. I think they're going to prioritize Fantastic Four over X-Men.
Agreed. I think Fantastic Four comes out first.
Yeah. And the reason why is this. I think because by the time the merger goes through, there will have been other X-Men movies released. I think, they probably won't want to step on those too much, because whatever people feel about them, they don't necessarily want to, compete with that, whether it's good or bad, immediately. But Fantastic Four, you can only go up from there.
Yeah, nobody has any level of attachment to the most recent ones, and those have been farther away even then, especially in this one. Now, people say, well, that's really fast. It really did not take them long to make to put Spider-Man in their movies. It was like the ink was still
like
dry.
A year and a half. Like, it was quick.
Yeah, so I do think they will do it, but for the very same reason. There is still another X-Men movie to be released. Some people, there's some people in the internet are like, oh, they're not going to release it now. No, they'll release it. It's out there. It's a thing that they basically can only make money on unless they spend a lot of money marketing it. But they won't. They just won't. They'll get it out there, and whatever happens. They won't put their own logos on it. Whether or not they release the New Mutants movie that is also just kind of
being made,
it'll get released somehow. I'm not sure theatrically, because I do believe Marvel will want to wipe the slate from those, and thus they need to give it time, to the point where I almost didn't put X-Men in this 10. But because I think that it would basically be one or the other thing. Either X-Men will be ready, or that's when you can throw in another Ant-Man movie.
Well, I think that I think something you might also see, stuff I weighed, is they might do more cosmic stuff. If they don't get to an X-Men movie, they might do maybe something with the Shi'ar. You have now access to the X-Men cosmic universe. I've heard rumors batted around about the Celestials or Eternals. Yeah, that's it. Sorry. So maybe they do an Eternals movie, though maybe not. I don't know.
It's so hard for you to believe, and that's somebody saying who like, oh, it's so fantastic, the Guardians, but it's like, not only the Eternals something that nobody's ever cared about, they've always been boring. It's like they're just self-serious.
Well, look what happened with Inhumans. So
exactly, they're lower rent than humans. So
I mean, like, I think there are some other possibilities, but I feel pretty secure in this list. Unless there are some sequels they decide not to make. Like, I could see them not making Ant-Man 3. I think they'll do that. I think, it's a matter of time. They seem ripe for it. Thor 4, I think, is maybe the least likely sequel that we named, but I also think that Thor 3 was such a hit that they'll want to ride now, and I think he's the hero that, of the big heroes, I think that'll be the easiest to bring back. So
and I think they finally got Thor right. They took out 3 cracks. They finally got it. I don't think they'd be like, okay, we're done. That was enough money. No. They're going to want to make more money. And like Thor Ragnarok was made largely, I believe, in Australia, right? Or maybe Australia, New Zealand. One or the others. They're the same thing to me. From over here.
Don't add us, Kiwis.
That appeals to the director and the star. They can be at home. So I think there's the only thing that would really keep it from happening is if Marvel is like, no, it's time to push new heroes. But why would they do that? Ragnarok and Infinity Wars finally brought Thor where he should have been. There's so many other Thor stories out there, although they kind of just got rid of a bunch of them by killing them. But there's still more. So I'm pretty sure that was happening. One idea I had is, what if they decide to do a 4th Iron Man? Like, I think that could happen. I know everybody's
I really don't think that would happen.
But it's kind of the same deal in that all of the other Iron Man movies were like at the beginning of this. I would love to see what they could do out of an Iron Man movie now that they are much more secure. The issues would be, will Tony Stark still exist? And do they need to pay him like $100 million?
So the money they would have to pay Robert Downey Jr. was the reason why I kind of doubted that. I think you might not have to pay him quite as much if he doesn't have to carry an entire movie. They'd still have to pay him a substantial amount of money if he's, just showing up for smaller roles. I did think about maybe Ironheart, the Riri, is that her name? I thought about maybe her because she's a newer hero, but I don't think it would be in the next 10.
I think they would need to see how successfully they're able to launch Ms. Marvel, and that would be the one you would target.
But that's the one that I'm, that's the new hero that I'm like, oh yeah, they're definitely going to do that. Not even a question. So I mean, I think we both see 2 or 3 new franchises, and we're going to see the first sequel to a couple new franchises too. So. Yeah, I think that's kind of what we're looking at for the next set of Marvel movies.
And what will bring us back to the podcast studio. So this bonus one kind of wraps up what we are covering in the summer. Whenever Ant-Man and the Wasp comes out for home video, we will watch it then. We will record a podcast for you then. And then after that, when the movies are in theater, we're going to try to come together and talk about our first reactions to each of them. And if you want to catch those podcasts, the best way to do it is to follow us in some format, whether that is going to our website at infinitystonepodcast.wordpress.com, whether that's following us on Twitter
at pod_infinity. And we know that's a bad handle, but seriously, the better ones were taken.
Or we're one character too long. We couldn't go Infinity Stone Pod. We could only be Infinity Stone Poe. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. You can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. And that's how you'll find out when a new one comes out. We appreciate everybody who's been listening, and please, in comments, let us know your rankings, whether it's your rankings of all the movies, whether it's your rankings of the superheroes, or whether what you think will be the next movies from Marvel.
Yeah. So we'll see you with Ant-Man and the Wasp sometime in the future.